We are good to go.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Amanda. So with I looked at the other session. I thought, I don't want to go up against that one. So I'm wondering if that's why we have a small audience. But what I'm thinking is that gives us an opportunity to have a more rich conversation. And so I'm going to go through some slides pretty quickly. But again, you're welcome to raise your hand and ask questions at any time. So I'm Jim Vernon. I'm the Dean for Business and Technology at Ames Community College. My claim to fame, I guess, on the teaching side is that I worked for Front Range for 12 years as a part-time and then full-time instructor. And I have been responsible for the digital badges initiative for Ames for a couple of years now, almost 2 years. So, and I used to have a warrior theme for this because it really felt like I had to be a lone warrior for a long time. But I switched, in case you hadn't caught on yet, to a Beatles theme just because I like the Beatles. There's no other significance. But um, it has been a long road. Starting in 2023, I attended the Badge Summit with one other colleague and came back. I was the one who came back enthusiastic saying, we got to do this. And I had one person on board in the college, and we naively thought we could do some badges that summer. Uh, Boy, were we wrong. But part of it was that we hit a technology barrier, and they said, well, we have to go through the acquisition process. And I realized we had a lot of other things to do. So making that long and winding road a short story, we finally got to a pilot this past fall, and we have issued our first Open Badges 3.0 and 2.0 compliant starting in January. And we have plans for a couple dozen more, I mean, dozen different badges with one of them would have hundreds of recipients, the others will have fewer. So that's been exciting, but I want to talk about a few things I've learned along the way. The first, and we learned this pretty early, I think, because we had to justify this as a strategic initiative. We did put together a value proposition. And if you're not familiar, I think there's a great value proposition for learners, for employers, or anyone viewing the badge, and for faculty and staff. Um, the other piece that I've learned a little more recently is that, and you'll see a little bit more about this in the next slide, it's about the rich information, which we were aware of in the beginning, both the portability on the learner side, but the information that badge viewers can get. And that's a benefit for faculty and staff too, in my opinion, that as educators, we can give a lot more information about what we've taught and what the student has learned and accomplished. Um, the way I'm employing this these days at Ames is to focus on skills, in particular where we can industry standards, which I'll get to in a second, but skills or specific knowledge. Um, the potential for digital badges was obvious, and that's why I came back from the first badge summit a couple years ago so excited. It's the fact that we can put so much more information in a badge as compared to a traditional HLC approved certificate, a diploma, a transcript, whatever. And transcripts, as you know, are not written in English, right? It's hard to decipher, and then you still don't know what was taught. Um, One thing I'll return to later is that would have helped me a lot with and Ames a lot with our pilot would be to find some specific examples and keep looking for them if you haven't started already, just to get some good ideas. I'm not saying that you should focus on skills, although I am recommending that for community colleges. You're also going to run into vocabulary. What's a micro credential? What's micro? And you're going to have vendors who are calling things certificates, and your registrar might not want to call them certificates with good reason. And they also sometimes talk about transcripts, and we do not want to confuse these with transcripts. And lastly, I did put in pathway there because we were a guided pathways college at Front Range Community College, and this is not guided pathways, but there are pathways to define within badges. They might not align though with pathways as you've defined them for your institution. I feel like I missed a slide. Sorry. No, maybe not. Sorry about that. Um, So actually, I'm getting close, so we can start having a discussion. Actually, but um, I repeated something, didn't I? Oh, sorry. Okay, actually, I'm going to wrap up here and then turn this hopefully to a conversation. I'm happy to talk more about our badges initiative, but I wanted to get through these to get some questions and discussion going. Oh, I know what I don't see on one of my slides is deep conversations. The rich information that we have available is a blessing and a curse, right? It's great to be able to go in and I'll talk about a specific example in a bit and have that information on a badge because uh, it's going to benefit both the student and the employer to have that information. But most of our courses and certificates, I think we'll get into more of this in the discussion. We have advisory boards. We advisory boards are typically very committed to us and very deeply sharing our mission, right? They want our courses and our programs to educate people to work in their industry. The deep conversations that I still don't think we've had and need for badges is if we're going to develop a badge, it has to be essentially almost owned by industry. We want that level of buy-in. We want to be able to go to them and say, look, here are the skills we want to badge. It's not just about the transcript, right? It's not even just about a course. It could be about one skill or two skills learned in a course. We need them to understand what that is and agree with how we assess it so that when someone earns a badge and we indicate their level of achievement, they know that's proof. And in fact, the vendor we're using is called proof of knowledge, and they totally get that idea, right? So that's the first thing, and that is a lot of work. It's work I'm looking forward to, though. The other things you're going to have to confront are governance, particularly because these aren't the only kinds of badges we can issue, and our pilot is pretty broad. We're doing faculty professional development. We are badging learning from some social sciences courses that have to do with death and dying. We're badging experiential learning. We're badging AI learning that's bridging both a classroom learning experience and an outside provider experience. I believe we'll be badging the Colorado State um, Department of Education. It's a bilingual certificate through our early college program. The other things, though, that I think you're going to want to think about are institutional knowledge sharing, which we have not really expanded very much yet because we're still in the pilot. And you will have to deal with multiple platforms and try to figure out why do you want one versus another. The last thing I mentioned is how do we get people to open these? Badges have to be accepted. I know, and I don't know what your level of badges is, so I'll learn that in a second. But if a if a learner doesn't accept the badge, it doesn't do any good at all. And it's up to them to open it, to accept it, to display it, and want to use it. We have a little bit of a chicken and egg problem, right? Because employers have to want to see them and they won't be able to commit to that until they see enough of them. I think that acceptance rates overall are climbing. I did see some information on that recently, and I think some of that is just as it develops, as more people become aware of badges, more people are curious enough to open them and accept them if they're learners, and to look at them if they're employers or others who are curious. So I think that's it. So thanks for listening. But what I would really love to get to at this point, and I don't know, I think I'll leave that up, but if we could kind of expand if people could turn on their video, I think that would be great too. I can go back to a slide if I need to, but it's not my intent. Oh, we have a lot more people too. Welcome everybody else. I see Chris has a question. Hey, Chris, nice to see you again. Sorry, your question just disappeared on me though. Let me get the chat back.
No, that's fine. My question was about are you using what skills are you using? Are you basing them off of like durable skills or
That is a great question. The answer to that right now is no, we're not using durable skills. We've looked at so many different standards, and
hmm
this has been a learning exercise in the pilot. I wasn't even sure what framework meant. And I'm still not sure I can easily define it. This is a framework, right? America Succeeds
Hmm.
is a framework for skills.
Yeah.
And so in a digital badge, for those of you that don't know, you can indicate what we're badging here is, in this case, durable skills. That's where we're defining these skills. Um, we want to get to credible third party standards wherever we can.
Hmm.
One of the places we're starting, and one of the things I am most excited about in the pilot is we are badging things from our welding program.
Yep.
And as Dean of Business and Technology, I never get tired of bragging about all our programs, but right now I'm bragging about them the most because they are already aligned with the American Welding Society,
Hmm.
AWS. So we don't we don't need, and I hate to say it that way, right? But I don't think America Succeeds would be a better standard for us when employers understand AWS and they also understand, and I'm
Hmm.
bragging again, all of our full-time faculty are required to achieve certified welding inspector status, which
Yep.
is a very big deal. So when they inspect the students' welds, they are applying that industry standard, and that's what the student has to meet to pass. Um, we are also the coolest badge by far, to my mind, in the pilot is a badge for our pressure vessel project, which is a capstone. Students have to essentially use every skill they've learned in
Hmm.
the past 11 courses to build a sort of Rube Goldberg machine that has no other purpose than to be very hard to make and hard to make leak proof. So we
Hmm.
then test that pressure vessel at 250 pounds per square inch to pass, 500 to, show a little
Hmm.
more street cred, and 1,000 is as high as we test. So when we get 1,000, that is a very big deal. And that's going to be a very big deal to
Yep.
industry. There's almost nobody who's going to hire a welder who can't appreciate, first of all, we're thinking of putting a picture of that pressure vessel in the badge. Where that logistics of doing that are a little much, but that's what's exciting about a badge is we don't just have to talk about it, we can show it. And we are seriously considering that. But even without that, an employer will certainly be able to put the blueprints in, right? And so we can put things like that in and say, this is what the student did. This was assessed by a certified welding inspector.
Hmm.
And you can take that to the bank, right? I don't know that we will always get to that. And I'm not suggesting we always should, but I think you can understand why I'm excited about that. And I'm just as excited about the other badges, but that one is to me a real exemplar of what the potential for digital badges is, certainly in the CTE space. And I'm not expecting everybody here to be in the CTE space. I just want to remind you, I have taught in the liberal arts and I'm a big fan of the liberal arts. I'm a liberal arts graduate. So I want to find a similar solution, if you will, or a similar
Hmm.
direction for badges that are not CTE. I also want to find that for badges that are, I really don't like the word non-credit, but that's the vocabulary we're stuck with until, in fact, I made a connection recently with CCCS who doesn't use the distinction between credit and non-credit. First person
Hmm.
I've encountered really who made that point. And what she said was just call them industry credentials.
Yeah. Usually, like that's what I've seen is industry, or they'll say workforce.
Right.
Um, that's
And
usually
that
what
can
they.
encompass either side,
Yep.
if you will. And I think that distinction needs to kind of go away to a certain extent anyway. Not completely, because there are
Hmm.
different rules, but we have to have common pathways to getting the same workforce readiness, I think is what we need there. And frankly, in other contexts, completely independent of digital badges, you start talking credit and non-credit to anybody who's not in higher education, their eyes glass over and they don't care. Like, tell me why this matters. And it's very difficult to do that sometimes. Yeah, it's important for financial aid, but it's not the only financial aid solution either. So thanks for the question, Chris. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I will just say is like I know a couple different schools are using the durable skills. That's why they're using the durable skills as sort of that tie-in for their non-CTE spaces.
Yeah, for from my perspective, this fits in my blessing and curse piece.
Yeah.
It's a deep conversation to go there, right?
Hmm.
I haven't opened this one, but I'm guessing that it's massive, right? And
Yeah,
maybe I'm wrong, but the
it's a
Department of
mix.
Labor is another framework, and
Yep.
it's got 30,000, or it's got some tens of thousands of skills defined. We looked at it for welding. We
Hmm.
didn't think it was any we didn't think it was better than AWS. It had maybe more skills, but I'm not even sure
Hmm.
it had that. And it didn't have the level of specificity of AWS. They have a lot of definitions and specs for each of the skills they talk about. So, um, but I think it's a great starting point, quite possibly better than the Department of Labor. But the nice thing about Department of Labor is it applies to almost anything,
Hmm.
and that's going to include the liberal arts as well. I don't know where America Succeeds is going in that in terms of arts and sciences, for example.
Yeah, and a lot of what you run into is it's about also your local is how does your local economics, your local industry value, or how do they understand the skill set? So it's
Yes,
working with those employers to sort of build out those
yes,
pieces.
absolutely. And again, I would start with advisory boards, but I'm glad you're just setting me up all day,
Yeah.
Chris. This is awesome. One
It's
of our
almost like we
next,
work in similar industries.
it is, it's almost like we have similar jobs.
Yeah.
One of our next steps is going to be, we hear the word ecosystem a lot. I think you're right that those local ecosystems are at least a partial answer to the chicken and egg problem that I
Hmm.
mentioned earlier and how we get everybody engaged. But they're also where we need to have those deep conversations. So the first step for us at Ames is the Northern Colorado sector partnerships. These are
Hmm.
broad coalitions of industry. There are six of them, and I could maybe name them, but you don't want to wait for me to remember them all. But in particular, for welding, we have a construction sector partnership and an and a manufacturing sector partnership,
Hmm.
both of which I think welding is relevant to. And we have good relationships with them already. We're part of those sector partnerships, and they've grown out of a talent pipeline need by and large. They're pretty, with all six, they're pretty broad. I mean, I think they cover
Hmm.
most things. Many of them probably won't get much engaged in an arts and sciences conversation, but
Hmm.
you can track back. It's a longer pathway, right? But you can track back in arts and sciences to what are the kinds of careers that people who are studying biology, for example, right? That there's a pretty close tie, obviously, to nursing, but other
Hmm.
careers in biology are going to have similar skills, right? And in fact, I don't know if we'll get it in on the pilot, but one of our pilot badges or series of badges is for lab skills in one of our biology classes. And those are very specific. They apply more to work in a lab than working as a nurse, although they're relevant for
Hmm.
both, right? So I think we have a handle on where to start with those conversations. And with the sector partnerships, my hope is that, again, when we have those conversations, we can get a subset of them to say, yeah, these are the skills that matter. And
Hmm.
if you assess them in this way and give us this information, we'll pay attention to them. I don't think anybody's going to say, oh, we'll hire. But what we really, I think, want to get to is, will they pretty much interview most people with that badge? Are they
Hmm.
predisposed to interview them? Can't guarantee that either, because maybe they have a hiring freeze, or we have an economic downturn. But I do want to create an ecosystem where they're expecting that, and where they look to that to see, oh, okay, this is how I know. I'm not looking at a transcript anymore. I'm looking at something much more specific. And yeah, I'm still going to want to see a demonstration, or I'm going to want to do interviews, those kinds of
Hmm.
things. Badges can't get you there, but neither does a resume, right? A
Yep.
resume gets you an interview. Maybe a badge will get you an interview with some places. There are a lot of manufacturing, smaller manufacturers especially, that might not do much things that are formal, and so badges could fit a need there too. And I don't mean to make this specific to manufacturing. I think, again, we've got other sector partnerships, we've got hospitality, we've got
Mhm.
nonprofit. I think all of the sector partnerships are relevant and all of them are a source of getting to that level, but that's not going to happen next month. That's not a pilot issue.
Yeah.
That's I hope, a Jim Vernon full employment sort of guarantee because that work isn't going to end for years. So that's kind of how I see it. It's going to be a heavy lift. I see something else in the chat. Um, oh, budgetary constraints. Yeah, nice question, Sheila. Thank you. I don't have a great answer there. Um, I think we can fit this work in without a whole lot of budget, but that's going to require, ditching some other things. One thing I think we can do in the CTE world is shift the focus of our advisory boards so that we're definitely having those conversations. If we have those conversations within our advisory boards, then getting those to the sector partnerships is not as much of a heavy lift because there is crossover. At least if your advisory boards are truly representative of industry, then there should be a good crossover. If you have the right advisory board, you could simply start there. I think if you could get a fairly large or at least recognized local employer to back one or more of your badges, I think you would literally be able to call that an industry standard, and local firms would tend to follow that and say, oh, okay, well, if they're using them, we're at least going to check them out. It's not perfect, but creating an ecosystem never is. So hopefully I addressed your question. So, and I welcome more of them. Oh, I thought I saw there was more, but I can't see anything. Is there anything else in the chat?
Not that I see. Yeah, Sheila just said tough question. Great idea using CTE. Thank you.
Yeah, could could I ask a question then if there isn't one out there? Could by a show of hands, I'm trying to figure out how to answer this, how to ask this question without a poll. I'm trying to get at sort of where is everybody on your own digital badging at your institution? Let's try how many have issued awarded at least one digital badge from your institution? Show of hands. I'm going to go with one right now. Thanks, Todd. Oh, wait. Stephanie also. So a couple. If you haven't, I would not feel bad. I don't think you're that far behind because I thought we were very far behind at Ames, and I still feel behind, but that's because I'm impatient. I don't think we actually are that far behind. The connection that I made with the system office a couple weeks ago, if you're not aware, I don't know how many of you are familiar with CCCS, so I'm not assuming everybody is, but CCCS started a digital badges initiative several years ago, and on their website there are dozens, if not hundreds, of digital badges displayed that they created in some sense. However, the system colleges don't generally seem to be using them from what I've heard, and I haven't asked everybody, but I've asked some of my connections at Front Range, and they're not aware of any actual badges being awarded, and it's not even clear whether they have a team working on it. The system office seems to be focused on the healthcare related professions, things like nurse aid, maybe nursing as well, and also seems to be working tightly with Community College of Aurora, from what I understand. I do not have a connection at Aurora, but that's what I've heard. And I'm not saying no other college is doing it, but it's not as far along as I first sort of looked at with dread, thinking, why are we not even started when they have hundreds? Well, I feel less insufficient about that. And I think our pilot's pretty exciting, but I also know, okay, there's still a lot more to do. Conversations that we've had with the vendor that's offered to do the demo for us, that's how we got to do the pilot, is proof of knowledge. they've invited me to present with them. So I think that's not just trying to butter me up, because that's a lot more investment from them. And so I am co-presenting at the Badge Summit with um, Tomas Minlin from POK, and possibly at some other venues. So, and let me return to one thing. I do not consider myself an expert as a result of that. I sort of feel like, okay, I'm presenting, now what? Well, I'm just being honest. This is where we are, right? We are not as far along as I would like to be. We don't have a complete infrastructure. We certainly don't have ongoing sustainability. So that budget question is looming in my mind as well. We are kind of right now turning to a formal written plan for digital badges, which we needed the pilot to inform that. So that's as quickly as we could get there. But I really would have liked to have had a written plan a year ago. And it's just, I think it's going to take longer than most people expected, but I think it's worthwhile. And as far as budgeting goes, the actual badging itself, I don't think is going to be all that expensive. The platforms want to charge fees for each badge, and they are, but I think they're coming down. I recall a couple of years ago when we naively thought we could do it in one summer, we were getting pricing around $5 a badge, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you multiply that by the number of students you have, you start to realize, wow, if you're going to badge things at a detailed level, that could get expensive. But I'm already seeing prices below three, 250 to three. So that's been a year, well, 2 years. I would expect anything like this would fall in price in that sort of term. The systems integration work, I don't really know. I think that's that would be a one-time investment, but I don't think it's a massive effort. It's not like a new registration system or something like that. I would also point out we're not currently tying our digital badge platform to, we use Workday. A lot of you probably use Banner. Um, Either integration is tough, and I don't think we want to go anywhere near that for Workday. What we would end up doing for Workday is not full integration, but finding a way to transfer information one way and the information right now that we have for most things is in D2L, not for everything, but for most things. So we would probably find a way to transfer that information. The problem is, and the blessing, in my opinion, of not having to do that is that below the course level, I talked about transcripts and how they don't have a lot of information. That's because that information isn't in Workday. It isn't in Banner, right? Banner is going to have a course grade, and that's where it stops. And to me, that's where badging starts in the other direction, in the more micro direction. It doesn't have to. You can badge combinations of courses, and you could do that out of your registration system. Many of you probably have a separate system that does diplomas and digital transcripts and those things. They have every bit the level of encryption, I think, as the digital badge world does. It uses blockchain technology. They're very secure, but they still don't have rich information. So until our registration systems have it, I'm going to argue that we shouldn't go there, which actually avoids a lot of cost. So, oh, not your department, Chris. Well, I can help with that. And I'd be happy to. It's not seeing a lot of questions. Anything else? We got plenty of time, and I really would love to hear what if you're not, sorry, let me ask a different question. So if you're not doing digital badges yet, what are your own either objectives? So this isn't a raise of hand. This is open your mic and tell me, well, what are you working on, or what are you hoping to work on?
A lot of what this is Chris again. A lot of what we're working on is getting more of that industry engagement first. So a lot of it is building more ties to our local industry and then going ahead and asking them what they want, because some want that and some don't. So it's like some of them like, oh, this is nice, but I'm not going to use badging, or we have our own model that we use, or we have XYZ, or they prefer it. It's kind of like whenever we look at the machining side, is looking at it and doing, are we doing NIMS? Are we not doing NIMS?
Yeah,
For us, we decided at this time not to pursue it because it's just not something that's valued in our area.
that sounds familiar to me because that's the same
Hmm.
thing our machining program decided at Front Range. That
Yep.
they looked into it. It was intriguing and
Hmm.
impressive, but not valued by local industry.
Yeah.
This,
Now I
yeah,
have colleagues on the other on like the East Coast that NIMS
yep.
is what you use.
Actually, yeah, there's an issue very parallel to that in manufacturing. There's a coalition called SACA, and
Hmm.
now I can't remember what SACA stands for. You've probably heard of them, but they have been issuing micro credentials essentially for skills in advanced manufacturing, and we administer some of the tests for that
Yeah.
in our industrial tech program. So our students are able to earn, but they're not badges, at least not yet. But their coalition is mostly east of the Mississippi,
Yep.
what I understand. So it's not clear how much value those SACA certifications will be, but they are micro credentials,
Hmm.
and so they could be valuable. And sometimes students move.
Hmm.
So we decided we definitely wanted to be able to provide those tests, and we have students who are interested in doing it. Um, so at least it gives them that opportunity. I don't want to forget about the impact of just the micro part of micro credential. There's a very serious need to do that in order to get more people out of the some college no credential bucket, which is something like
Hmm.
43 million Americans. But I also think that just having it's kind of like gamification, right? A badge is leveling up.
Yep.
And so I wouldn't discount that value either, although for that you don't need a digital badge, right?
And the other thing I've seen is like in the IT field that their entire program is tied to stackable credentials. So they've taken the
Right,
idea of badging, but they've just swapped it down to industry credentials where they go ahead and they're
right,
getting, TIAA plus, and then they
right,
get network plus, and they get specific credentials, Cisco, different things like that to go ahead and build that into their degree.
right. And if anything, we're going in the opposite direction. We accept those things for prior learning assessment,
Yep, exactly.
right?
Yeah.
So, but it's bi-directional in theory, right? Because if
Hmm.
you pass our networking class, we believe we've prepared you for that exam, but you still have to take the exam.
Yep.
But it is a pathway to getting that. So that pathway runs both ways. But the micro credential gives us the opportunity to have people earn badges as they go. And if we can stack badges into courses, for example,
Hmm.
that's one of the things I would love to do. I realize that's not a layup, right? Awful lot
Yep.
of work is going to have to go into how can we define badges that will allow us to say when you have these seven, you have machining 1020 or
Yep.
whatever it might be. Right. Do I need to call on people? Because I will. Come on,
Everyone's
folks.
sitting in the back of class. They're like,
Yeah. No, I understand people, you know, actually, I'll open it up to other questions. Are there other things you wanted to hear from me about, or, things I might have mentioned that we could go back to? Okay. I'm going to randomly choose some. Oh, now you're leaving because you're afraid I'm going to call on you. Well, if you're still here, I'm going to call on you anyway. Donna Wood, what do you think?
I'm also wondering if people are doing lunch as well.
Yeah, I think so. I'm feeling a little bit like Buck Henry. There's an old Saturday Night Live routine on that one. I think you could look it up. So I will say a little bit more about governance. So we've deferred conversations on governance, and I'm not sure that's wise, by the way. Just because we've done it doesn't mean
Hmm.
I think it's a great idea. We've had a lot of fits and starts, but we've deferred conversations on governance. And my my learning tells me that, so when we look at the types of badges, or I was calling them types, I don't know what I'm going to call them in the future, but we have badges for CTE learning, which is easier to translate directly into skills. We have badges for course learning in the arts and sciences, as I mentioned,
Hmm.
a little bit harder, but still the relevance is there. The death and dying badges, which I know sounds a little odd for badges, but we have badges for three different perspectives on death and dying, which we think will
Hmm.
be very relevant to people in healthcare and care related and even first responder professions. So having that liberal arts background is one more example, and one more reason I'm a fan of the liberal arts is because I've learned all kinds of things in liberal arts that I've applied in my career. I just didn't know that I would do that. Um, but we've got those. We have faculty professional development where the badge itself will be handy because we're going to use it to not automate, but to simplify the process for part-time instructors to
Hmm.
get higher tiered pay. So we're tying it to professional development and completion of other milestones, and we digitally badge those. And then the admin side of things is much simpler to move um, to move instructors from one tier to a higher tier. We are also badging co-curricular activity-based things. Um, and we are badging, there's one more thing. Well, staff professional development is similar. And oh, and of course, community or continuing education. Uh, we started on that one with something that sounds more like CTE. We have a partnership with a company called Alquist 3D. They are a pioneer in 3D concrete printing. So
Hmm.
they assemble, I think, the machines, but they've been doing a lot of project work as well to prove the technology. They have a partnership with Walmart, for example, to do some kind of construction for 30 stores nationwide, that sort of thing. So we have an intro to 3D self-paced online class that is community education. And
Hmm.
we have a follow-on hands-on workshop over 2 weekends at Ames. And the audience for that is nationwide. So we get people traveling into that hands-on. We
Hmm.
don't get as many for that as we do for the online course, but we have developed badges. That was the first one we issued. I've been in discussions with Alcos. We're going to split that into two badges because the learning is different. You know, the skill in the online self-paced is more theory and knowledge. It's not hands-on. So, but it's still recognized by Alquist as being valuable. They want people who work for them to have at least that level, and
Yep.
they prefer them to have some of the hands-on experience before they start to work for Alquist. So it's not exactly an industry standard, except there aren't very many players in that industry. And so we've had that opportunity, but we have plenty of other courses in community education. Our nonprofit work is in that sector. It's not in our traditional academic framework. So we have a nonprofit management. I'm not sure that's what it's called, but we have a certificate that
Hmm.
we offer through that pathway, and we intend to badge things for that too. That's also one of our sector partnerships in Northern Colorado. So I know I started on governance, but those are a lot of different players. And so it's a pretty complex problem. We don't have it figured out. We're certainly going to
Hmm.
need policies and procedures, but before we get there, we have to figure out how these different I'm now, instead of calling them badge types, I'm tempted to say the the organizations within the college that are awarding these badges are quite different. And there is some overlap, there is some potential, I would say, conflict that we have to be careful of. But in general, what we'd like is distributed governance. So I don't want to get in the way of student affairs, badging things
Hmm.
like student government or other student experiences. What I also don't want, though, is for no differentiation between that badge and a welding skills badge. They're very different animals, right? And so that's going to have to be tackled by governance. And I don't have the answer to that because the pilot just isn't going to get us there. We're doing the different kinds of badges, but we've got groups that are kind of splintered in the college working on different things. And I'm guessing using different assumptions. One thing I've learned, and I don't know if this is true at some of your institutions, is some of them are not actually doing digital badges and they're saying they are. What I would describe them doing is they're doing digital stickers. They're doing nothing more than ordering an image from Sticker Giant and putting it on the fridge, right? And I'm not saying that's not a good idea for a household to, get the kids to realize they've accomplished something, but it's not the same. And I think that's a governance issue as much as anything. Otherwise, industry won't trust us. All right, I'm gonna keep calling on some people. I'm going in the other direction, so I'm randomly choosing them from my screen. Louise Usher, is your mic on? Or could you put it on? Let me know what you think.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi. It was I came in a bit late, but it's very interesting what you're saying about badges and how much thought and effort has to go into thinking about the value that others will perceive,
Yeah,
um, both in terms of industry, but also those people who are going to go through the course and obtain the badge and then put it out there in the world that they've received this badge. So there's a lot of thought on in kind of the developer end, and thinking about things and putting things in place. But the challenge is that the world is always changing as well. So
yeah.
it brings up a lot of challenges from that perspective as well.
Do you mind if I ask what institution you're with?
I'm not at an institution at the moment, but I was
Oh,
in the UK in Solent. Yeah.
in what?
Solent University. So we did a lot of things
Oh,
like
okay.
maritime studies
Yeah.
and things like this. So yes, thinking about working in kind of that academic perspective plus bringing industry in,
You bet.
yeah,
So,
it's very
yeah,
challenging.
I know nothing about education in the UK, but I have seen differences between um, universities, especially R1 and community colleges, in the very nature of what's micro. That's actually where that
Hmm.
came from. I recall at my first badge summit, I came away completely confused, but still intrigued because I was asking. Our initiative is actually both micro credentials and digital badges, and I was trying to
Yeah,
figure out the distinction, which I sort of know. But when I asked about, well, could a micro credential or badge be, is it smaller than a certificate? Is it smaller than a course? The R1s almost always said, oh, no, 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 it's much, much bigger than a course. It's a year-long program because to them, that's micro, right? So an
Hmm.
yeah,
executive MBA program or an executive nonprofit certificate that is typically, a full year sort of, maybe it's part-time, but it's still a full year program and it's
yeah,
fairly robust, right?
yes, level of
To the
study.
ones that I've encountered, and maybe this is familiar to you, to the R1s and other universities I've encountered, that's micro, that's
Yeah,
a badge. And obviously my view is quite different, but my view is shaped by being at a community college and where I think most of our employers need to be. But that is going to inform what you do, right?
yeah,
There's no way it can't. And I'm not saying that the universities have it wrong. I'm saying that we need to be careful in this space that we don't talk past each other because we
Hmm.
can still learn from each other. I think a executive MBA can be quite valuable, um, but we're not talking about the same kinds of challenges when we get to that
yeah,
point, right?
yeah,
And so
yeah,
thank you. I appreciate your perspective on that.
exactly.
Anybody else from a university or with a university background? How about community colleges? There's not a whole lot of folks left, but actually, I think you're the ones who were in the room to start with. So um, maybe by show of hands, who works at a community college besides Chris and myself? Okay, Casey and just Casey, I guess. Casey, do you mind if I ask which community college?
With San Juan College in Farmington, and I'm actually teaching dual credit college courses at the high school. So I'm initially a high school teacher, but I have moved into the dual credit portion.
Great.
I haven't heard of anything with San Juan College doing digital badges yet, but I'm just new this semester. But at the high school that I work for in Bloomfield, we are doing CTE badges for the business portion, as well as welding and carpentry and healthcare and then food. So we just got that approved this year to go ahead and get our kids certified with badges. So I'm enjoying listening to the content and just learning right
That's
now.
great. That's great. You know, I think that high school programs will be a driver here. We're certainly hearing from ours. I don't think we have any of them actually doing digital badges. Are yours, I'm not being critical here, are yours true digital badges, open badges 2.0 or 3.0?
I can't tell you. Let's see. Because I'm actually just getting into it. I want to
That's
make sure
okay.
I'm doing it before my kids
Yep.
do it. So I know what I'm doing.
Yep.
But we're through G-Metrics and Certiport. So those are the two.
Okay. I guess I'm not I'm not sure whether they are digital badge platforms, but I'm not being critical here. Just the digital badge it's not strictly required. It's to me, when you get to the actual standards compliant, open badges 2.0 or 3.0, what you're doing is there are several things that are validated and they're self-validating, which is nice. So a transcript is not typically self-validate. I mean, it is, but it's not portable as well. So they're self-validating, meaning when you open a badge, I can even show this if we're running out of time, but when you open a digital badge, whether it's yours or someone else's, you can immediately, first of all, a third party is saying, this is really Jim, this was really issued by Ames, and we have verified that this is Ames, which they did, which our platform did. We had to go through a process so that they were rock solid sure that this was coming from Ames Community College. They checked it through back channel, if you will, with our IT folks and are based on our domain name and some encrypted conversation there. And then we're certifying, yes, this was truly awarded to Jim. You can also connect on LinkedIn to make sure that the digital platform is validated. So when somebody displays your badge on LinkedIn, people can have confidence that, yeah, that's an Ames badge or that's your badge. But the rich information can still come through in I think it's called Web 2 standard badge, which looks great. And as long as it has the additional information, if your ecosystem doesn't need that encryption, doesn't need that level, it's actually a much cheaper option for one thing. There's no marginal cost on those for us. We can do as many of those as we want. And I'm going to argue that for some of the digital badges, that is how we'll control some of the cost and differentiate them. Right. I think it's great to give somebody a badge for participating in student government, for doing lots of things. I'm not so sure that I want it to look and feel exactly like a badge for a specific skill or even a badge for like our more general death and dying badges. Those have a little more weight, in my opinion, and should be at the same level of security as a transcript. So glad to hear you're doing that, and excited about the high school program angle because we're starting to, high school, I think, is going to drive some apprenticeship stuff too, which I know is off topic, but that's what I'm seeing in our service area at Ames. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. We are 1 minute from time, I believe, at least by my clock. So any final questions, observations, or thoughts? Ooh, My stopwatch just hit 50 minutes exactly. So, all right. I want to thank everybody for coming. And Amanda, I don't know, do you share my contact information? I'm happy to, if somebody wants to contact me, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I'm Jim.Vernon. I guess I should put it in the chat, huh? I'll do that really quickly if I can. If I could only get to the chat. My mouse decided to stop working.